Ankui. Season 4 episode 5 of From's core theme was all about remembering, and we saw that present throughout every character in the episode. We saw Jade whilst on his trip trying to remember his past carnations, how to save the children, and how to ultimately escape the town. Tabitha with the dolls that she had when she was younger. Henry and what his life on the outside was like. Julie and her story walking, and Marielle and her being stuck in the caves. However, as we saw with Jade and Tabitha, by looking into the past, there can be information there that'll help their future and present day selves. With creatures conjuring up an awful death for Roger, this episode was a great one that provided some answers and showed just how dark the show could truly be. So with that, let's dive into the episode, break it down, and I'll share what I thought of it. Here is from Season 4 Episode 5, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Jade's trip. For Jade, this episode was all about remembering his past, looking deep inside of his mind to the previous carnations of when he was in the town, as it's confirmed that, like Tabitha, he's somebody that's essentially always been there. But whilst looking deep inside of those memories, he was hoping to find a way to navigate out of the town and to also save the children. Whilst Jade was on his trip, he saw the young version of himself playing a violin, and he was playing a song that he would always perform, but was specifically playing when his grandmother died, a moment that he felt inside of him when it happened. Along with this, after drinking the blood that the man with the skull gave him, he then saw previous carnations of himself inside of the town from the different timelines. It was when he was here where he saw the similarity between all of them, and that was that they weren't killed by the monsters of the town. They were all murdered by the people of the town. This showed that the townspeople eventually turned on the different versions of Jade over the years, and that it happened in every single iteration, meaning that it would soon be happening again to Jade, and it was essentially unavoidable, showing that the town is quite literally a cycle that's impossible to break out of because it always happened. This also meant that the mass slaughtering is something that's definitely going to be taking place too. The townspeople essentially turn on Jade because once he reveals to them that he's been there before, that the children in the woods were calling for him, they begin to blame him for them all being there and like he had a hand in the creation of the town. One would imagine that if the townspeople realized that the carnations of Jade were a common denominator about history repeating itself, then they might view the death of him as a way out, so I can see why the people would look to do that. Jade was looking deep within his mind for a way out of there, and it ultimately led him to a hallway through a door that led to the caves, which was behind a door inside of Colony House in the basement, a door that doesn't seem to exist there in the actual timeline. So it makes me wonder if following this trip, we're gonna see Boyd and Jade looking to open up that gateway to the caves from there. Throughout the entirety of the episode, we thought we were watching Jade wandering around Fromsville the entire time. However, what we actually saw was that Jade was just sitting in his chair the entire time, with Boyd watching over him and him imagining it all in his mind. I thought that was the perfect thing about it. Jade's answers were inside of his mind all along, and that was where he found them. He didn't find them in the physical Fromsville, but he found them inside his memory of it from over the years, which is exactly what the intention of the trip was. When Jade was going down the hallway to the caves, he ended up going to the spot where the children died, and he was placed inside of a tomb by the creatures that emerged from the shadows. Inside of the tomb that he was placed in was one of the children, and they said to him, Ankui, which we know means remember, and it was here where he then woke up and said how he knew what he needed to do to get everybody out of there and for it to not happen again. As we saw by the previous carnations of Jade, they always got killed by the townspeople every time. So breaking the cycle is something that's key to altering the outcome of the events. Maybe Jade was taken to that specific spot because he needs to either sacrifice himself to the monsters where the children were killed in order for the other townspeople to be able to escape, as he's a common denominator. If the people don't turn on each other, which is what it seems like is going to be an inevitability, and could be because of Jade, I wonder if the events altering will ultimately break the cycle. Jade was certain on what it is that he needed to do, and the spot where he was laid in the tomb is something that's going to be of great importance. So I think we're going to see Boyd and Jade heading in that direction and looking to see what's underneath that stone that Jade was placed in. I did find it interesting that it was said that what happened to Tabitha was far worse than being killed by the townspeople, which is what happened to Jade. Tabitha and Jade seem like two people that the town wouldn't turn on at the moment, so I'm both excited and fearful over what could be on the horizon for them. Tabitha at the lake with the scarecrows. Everything about this part of the episode was peak From in my opinion, whether it be the dragging in of the scarecrows from the lake, the melancholic score that underpinned the scene, the creative and brutal death of Roger, or the memories that Tabitha was digging deep into. With what were believed to be bodies being found at the end of the previous episode, we saw that they actually turned out to be scarecrows, and with Donna then realizing that scarecrows are normally used to keep things away, she wanted to put them back into the lake because she thought it was keeping something under there. However, she couldn't have been more wrong. Tabitha had actually seen those dolls before, but they were a lot smaller and she used to play with them when she was younger. However, now they were huge. These were the dolls that the angry man threw into the lake, but then when he died, they emerged and wanted to get revenge of some kind. This made me wonder about the power of the lake. We know that the lake didn't heal and it wasn't the Lake of Tears because the bird that Ethan was caring for died, but with it being able to make the dolls bigger and also fueled with rage. I wonder if there is a power that's in there. We did hear singing out there during the night and it was almost like a siren of some kind, so I wonder if there's going to be more than meets the eye with that. These scarecrows were definitely the most terrifying thing of the season so far. When they stormed in, grabbed a hold of Roger and then ripped his jaw off, it was absolutely brutal and showed that they were taking no prisoners and giving no chances. Even when they placed Patty's face on the fire, they were on a mission. It was only when Tabitha remembered and used one of the totems to kill it when it stopped and the others then fled the scene. She said she remembered what to do, which is why she picked up the totem, but what this showed us was that the totems don't actually work in the way that we thought. We originally thought that they were a boundary that kept the monsters at bay. However, if they acted as a boundary or a barrier, then the scarecrows wouldn't have gone there. So we still don't properly understand what they're used for. There was a moment in this episode where Ethan said to Donna how he liked it when she was around because it felt less scary, and honestly, when he said that, I thought it was going to be some subtle foreshadowing which was insinuating that this was the episode where Donna was going to die. When that scarecrow got a hand on her as well, I thought she was toast, but thankfully she got to live. One moment that I think is going to be important in the unraveling of Jade and Tabitha is the fact that Patty actually ended up surviving this ordeal. She saw Tabitha acting like she had a deep connection with the town when they were inside of the hut, and like how the townspeople began to blame Jade in the previous iterations, I think we could ultimately see that happening with Tabitha too. Division is definitely a core theme of this season, and whilst I originally thought that it was going to be the townspeople against Boyd, it's now going to be the townspeople against Jade and Tabitha. I believe the people will feel like Jade and Tabitha have answers that they're simply not sharing, and a change in sentiment and mood towards them could begin because of that. Henry's breakdown. If Jade and Tabitha aren't going to divide the town, then it feels like Henry could be the next person to end up causing widespread panic with him speaking of the man in yellow. Somebody who Boyd didn't want anybody speaking of because he didn't want to start widespread panic, but there Henry was speaking of the fact that he ate his wife Miranda. Henry's breakdown is all too real because after hearing the traumatic news about Miranda being eaten, the image was something that he couldn't shake from his mind. Hence why he turned to the bottle to simply numb his mind, but instead it had the opposite effect. It ended up making him look back on happier times with his wife and Henry when they weren't stuck in the town and how life used to be. Henry was playing and singing the song, Leaving on a Jet Plane, and with the lyrics, Leaving on a jet plane, don't know when I'll come back again, it was essentially speaking of what happened to Miranda, and now what happened to him with the fact that he was stuck in the town not knowing if and when he'd return to his regular life. Victor revealed to Kenny what happened with the man in yellow and his mother, so I think that's something that could begin to cause Kenny's mind to spiral and simply add to the division even more. Kenny's out there navigating, trying to make sure Fatima is safe whilst creating her golem, trying to keep Sophia safe, trying to make sure Henry and Victor are okay, and now he's holding on to the information of the man in yellow feasting on the residents in the town. Marielle's memory. This story was all about showing us that Sophia was playing with Marielle, and she was doubling down on the fact that Marielle doesn't believe in a higher power by saying that she was a prophet that was chosen by God to hear the suffering. Sophia made sure that Marielle was being tortured and reminded of when she was chained up in the cave. She heard the screams of all of the people that had died in the town, which confirmed to her that there wasn't even a way of escaping Fromsville in death. But also, when Sophia touched Marielle, she began hallucinating and seeing herself chained up again. Right now, I think Sophia's goal is to basically cause chaos amongst the townspeople and for a lack of trust to form and for division to begin to rise to the surface. As we know, the man in yellow's hungry and ready for that feast that we know that he has every cycle, so Sophia's essentially just playing with her food before she eats it. I actually found Marielle to be quite annoying in this episode, and I thought her acting was a little stale, which was a bit disappointing. The line delivery was flat, and when she was panicking and in that state of hallucination, I thought it was performed quite poorly. Marielle was onto something in this episode though, as she said how there was something old and ancient that was there feeding off of the suffering and that it didn't stop even after they died. When she said that, if only she knew that the person that was causing it and the higher power that she didn't believe in was standing right in front of her. With Sophia being so close to Marielle and tormenting her, I do wonder if Marielle will begin to spot the signs that there's something not quite right with Sophia. My review of the episode. This was a strong episode of the show in my opinion. I feel like it had a bit of everything. It had clues, adventure, answers, horror, tension, and humour. Jade's trip around Fromsville inside of his mind was definitely the most fun part of the episode that encapsulated all of those things. I loved the panic that would be in his face when he thought that he lost Boyd, but then the relief when he appeared in front of him again. I also loved the fact that it literally all took place inside of his mind whilst he was sitting on the chair. It was a smart way of showing us that he was literally going deeper and deeper inside of his head. I also loved the point of view shots that we had during his story as it added to that level of immersion during this trippy scene. His chemistry with Boyd was maybe the best that we've ever had in the show. The way that Boyd was there for him and the reliance that Jade had was something that just made me laugh so much. I also thought the revelation of seeing the previous carnations there and Jade finding out that they were him was something that we'd been waiting for. We saw him getting closer to the answers whilst also adding in mystery, and it made me feel like the journey that we went on wasn't wasted and for nothing. The core theme of the episode being centered around remembering was a theme that really cut through amongst all of the characters and was clear to see. The whole idea and theory about the town feeding off of the suffering and that being the very thing that's enabled it to thrive and for the cycle to continue was a revelation that felt like it was finally confirmed. As per usual with Sophia, even though she only had a small involvement, the menacing nature that she holds and the eerie stone-cold blank expression and smile managed to creep me out whenever it happened. I also thought the enjoyment that she got in Julie not being able to hone her storywalking ability showed just how much the man in yellow was reveling in the disagreements and confusion that was beginning to form. Fatima's story is one that I am beginning to get a little bit tired of. The focus on her mentioning that she feels like one day she's going to look outside and see Smiley is something that I feel is most likely going to happen, and this was the show just informing us. But other than that, with her just making the golem, until it's built and until we find out if it actually works, the less screen time with her, the better. A character that I do feel is almost being a bit wasted these days is Christy. She just kind of pops up as this person of support for Marielle and she's never really that heavily involved in stories anymore, which I think is a shame. Now that we're halfway through this season of the show, I can comfortably say that this is beginning to show signs of it actually being a great season. I think the foundations have been laid down for the man in yellow to eventually reveal himself, for division to form in the town and for mistrust to be the beating heart of Fromsville moving forward. All I'll say is bring on the next episode. So, there you have it, from Season 4, Episode 5, Ending Explained.